What are the key areas that you would look at to say, okay, I'm trying to determine who I think will be my favorite for this Masters? How does it compare to what they've done in the past, which is difficult because when we're looking at the stats, which I can do with the PGA Tour, where do I go to try to get a sense of where players are that are on LIV, right, to do a comparison? And then it's really interesting because when you do a comparison, I'll give you one example of what I'm talking about, strokes gained approach. Scottie Scheffler's number one in the category. It's an interesting category. This is current. Scottie Scheffler's number one. Shane Lowry's number three. I'm just jumping around a little bit. Justin Thomas is number 5. Nick Taylor is 14. Right? And then I look at it, I go, okay, well, where do I go to make sure I get a stat based on the same criteria that was before guys started leaving for LIV to compare? So first one I went to was 21-22, right? Brooks Koepka is Brooks Koepka. He was 132nd. He's an outlier because he does incredible things in majors. In 21-22, number 1 in that category is Will Zalatoris. Number 3, Colin Morikawa. Number 5 is Cam Smith. 38, for example, was Jon Rahm. Last year, same criteria, strokes gain approach, Jon Rahm was 4th. So it seems like it's a question of, do we take a look at areas where players are exceptional? And let me just go through some of them with you. You guys watch these graphics that Andrew has built this morning. You'll see what I'm talking about. Strokes gain approach on your screen. Scottie Scheffler, as I mentioned, is number 1. You can see Shane Lowry there is number 3. Justin Thomas is number 5. I'm jumping around a little bit, but you can see some big names starting to jump out, right? There's Will Zalatoris at number 9. I mentioned that he was number 1 in 21-22. And in fairness, when I look at 21-22, or even I look at last year, it's in the balance of the full year and not relative to where we are right now, which obviously current numbers would be. Greens and regulation, which I think greens and regulation is the most important stat at Augusta National. If you're looking for a stat to say, give me an idea, give me a trend. Oh, look who's number 1. 76%. Again, because we don't have a full picture of the world of golf, but the picture that I do have, Scottie Scheffler's number 1 at 76%. It's really interesting because when you look at the rest of even the top 10, you look at it and it goes huge gaps of players that are not in the Masters, which makes you realize that when you're comparing the Masters, when you're comparing Augusta National to the season on the PGA Tour as yet, it is not an apples-to-apples comparison. Because the most important stat, in my view, is clearly not the most important stat on the PGA Tour, even though those names listed are having good seasons, save for Scottie Scheffler, where you can look at it and go, well, that makes sense. All right, strokes gained putting. Kind of a no-brainer, right? Look at the list. Look at number 5 that jumps out there. Matthew Pavone. Came to the PGA Tour, got his promotion through the DP World Tour, formerly known as European Tour. Promptly came over here and has won. Look at number 6, Jordan Spieth. If I do that same comparison, Jordan Spieth, number 6, strokes gained putting, in that 21-22 season, which, again, I told you I went back to try to grab other names for comparison. For example, 21-22, Jon Rahm was 28th. Jordan Spieth was 155th ranked in 21-22. Last year, he was 79th. There's a lot of interesting stuff here. Andrew, you just leave this up here for a second as we go through some of these numbers with strokes gained putting. This year, strokes gained putting. I hear a lot of people online talking about Xander Schauffele. Well, when it comes to putting, Xander is off the boil. Last year, he was 5th in strokes gained putting. Currently, he's 80th. That's not horrific, but it's not even average. right? Rory in 21-22 was 16th because there's all the talk about coming in, the storylines. Rory McIlroy's going for the career Grand Slam. He was 16th in 21-22. Last year, he was 65th. This year, he's 94th. Right? There's a lot of debates. I've seen it online, too, where people are saying, well, Rory's not in form. And other people say, what do you mean he's not in form? But in that one critical category, he's going in the wrong direction, in fairness. Jordan, again, to go back and tell you he's 6th, just to reiterate, 155th in 21-22 and 79th last year. Scotty Scheffler, he's the anomaly in all of this, too. In this category, he was 162nd last year, which goes back to that same theory that I have, that currently the world of golf that we live in is a ball striking for dough and putt for show. Because what these great ball strikers need to do, in my view, is have a week with the putter. And it doesn't have to be a great week. A lot of times it does, which is interesting. They lead in strokes gained putting, or they're amongst the leaders in strokes gained putting, when the rest of the year they're nowhere in sight. Scotty right now, strokes gained putting, as we speak, is 99th. But clearly, again, you have to look at that and go, okay, that 99th is based upon an average of everything he's done to this point, instead of looking at it, say, over the last 3 events. Current form, because current form is a consideration for the Masters. Experience is a consideration for the Masters. The average starts at the Masters for a winner is 6. Right? Really interesting numbers. Okay, another, I think, critical stat, particularly around Augusta National and where you have a lot of these really tight little lies. Strokes gained scrambling. Again, maybe there's no surprise here. Look who's number 10. Scotty Scheffler. Shane Lowry's number 11. Victor Hovland, a lot of people talking about Victor Hovland, rightfully so, with his record at Augusta National, 71st in that category. Xander, 74th. Will Zalatoris is 80th. Scotty Scheffler, strokes gained scrambling, is 156. Before you scratch him off your list, he's leading in greens and regulation, strokes gained approach. Of course he's going to be higher in scrambling. Right? Because he's hitting the greens all the time. So he's, 21-22, because I did that comparison, this is one of the first places where Brooks popped up. Scrambles like crazy. Justin Thomas was 5th. Tony Finau was 6th. Matt Fitzpatrick was 7th. This is 21-22 in this same category. John Rahm was 110th. Right? So what we tried to do I was going through all these numbers last night, coming into today. And so as I'm putting these different categories together, now you could add more categories to it. You could definitely add more categories to it. Like, for example, I think total driving would be a category that we easily could add. So, but what we did do, because we went deep into these specific categories, greens and regulation, strokes gained approach, strokes gained putting, 50 to 125 yards. I haven't even had a chance to talk to you about that yet. And scrambling, before I give you the averages. And thus, based upon performance, and in this case, based upon recent form, they all fit. Let me talk to you about 50 to 125 yards. 50 to 125 yards. Scotty Scheffler, again, probably to the shock of no one, is leading at 13 feet 1 inch. Max Homa's number 4. JT's number 9. Tony Finau's 20th. Shane Lowry's 93rd. Rory's 101st in that category, 101. Will Zalatoris is 123rd. In 21-22, again, my efforts to find leaders so I could say, well, here's a few guys that I can't judge because they're playing live. I picked up through the first 15, I had JT, Morikawa, Xander, and Jordan Spieth. I didn't have anybody in like a remarkable position, which shows you the nuance of human beings and also major championship golf. In 22-23 last year, Morikawa was second. Scotty Scheffler was fifth, consistency there. Homa, who's this year fourth, was 16th. And Rory, who's 101st, last year was 18th. Draw from that what you will. Because it's interesting, because if you look at what we're talking about now, I don't feel great about Rory McIlroy based upon key performance areas relative to current form. Now, he's playing this week. If everything switches and he finds it, yeah, that's when these stats you throw out the window, because the only thing that matters is what you're doing right now. The averages don't mean much. But coming in, the averages mean everything. So with that said, I'll give you three in reverse order. I'll go 3, 2, 1. I'll give you three that I think are worth keeping an eye on. Dom's got a question for me first. Dom, what do you got?
Well, it's not a question. I want you to go over that list. I've been scrambling as well, going over some stuff. My laptop is in front of me. And I know the list. I believe I know the list you're going to go through, and I think I have a name to add to that list. So go ahead.
Oh, my 3, 2, 1, you want to put a fourth in there?
Yeah, but my fourth is actually going to be in the second slot.
I like that. Okay, so let me go through three that I've already identified. Dom's going to throw one in here. The reason I was laughing is Dom's so classy, because I'll be in the middle of a sentence, and in my earpiece I'll hear Matt. I'm like, what is place on fire? What's going on, Dom? I got a new name I want to add to. All right, with an average of 46, Matthew Pavone, right? 35th in greens and regulation, 24th strokes gain approach, 5th in putting, 101st in 50 to 125. Get it? Understand? 68th in scrambling. What weighs against Matthew Pavone? He's got the current form. He's got a lot of good things. Experience at Augusta National. All right. From there, and these last two aren't going to shock that I'm going to give you, but then Dom's going to wedge one in here in just a second. Wyndham Clark. Weighted average 35th. 13th in greens and regulation. Again, to me, greens and regulation are the most important stat that we have. 31st in strokes gain approach. 12th in putting. 18th in 50 to 125. And scrambling, he's outside of the top 100. So that's why his average got pulled up. And then the number one for me with this list, and again, we've got another one coming at you in just a second. Scotty Scheffler at 22.4. 1 in greens and regulation, 1 in strokes gain approach, 99th in strokes gain putting. But again, current form would suggest otherwise, because there's all these little caveats you have to pull in. 1 in 50 to 125, 10 in scrambling. And Dom, who do you got to wedge in there?
I'm going to give you their order. 29th, 35th, 57th, 17th, and 29th. So nothing that's a massive, massive weakness for a number that is 33.4, which is higher than Wyndham Clark's number.
Yep.
But he's got the Matthew Pavone problem of the no experience. Ludwig Oberg.
Okay, well, if he were to do it, you're talking about a guy doing something absolutely historic too. But that's a really good pick. I'm going to write that down.
You're going to write that down. You write that down.
Ludwig Oberg. Okay, guys, what do you think? Dom, did you do a question of the day?
I did do a question of the day. It's a very complex question. You want me to read it?
No, I want you to send it to us from telepathy and as we fade to break.
The question of the day is, who will win the Masters? That's the question of the day.
What are you getting back?
And it's a write-in. So we've got, well, I'm going to try and collect some names here because there's people firing in from all over the place, just throwing one name after another. So I'm going to try and make like a spreadsheet where I know how many people picked how many people, and then at the end of the show we can see where we're at here.
So we've given you the names: Scotty Scheffler, Ludwig Oberg, Wyndham Clark, and Matthew Pavone, based upon a whole set of criteria, more math than emotions, are the four. But, Dom, I'm not changing. I know you're going to pressure me later on and say, am I going to change my pick? I'm not changing my pick. I had picked Joaquin Niemann, 2 weeks ago? I don't forget when we had that conversation.
It was a while ago, yes.
I don't even remember who you picked because you were all over the place. You picked somebody, then you're like, change your mind, and you change the rules.
I reserve the right to change my mind until probably during the tournament.
Until the 17th hole on Sunday, conclusion of the 17th hole on Sunday. So if at the risk of violating all of your unwritten rules, who is your pick for the Masters as we enter the week?
Brooks Koepka.
Brooks, he says. See, I liked yesterday when Tripp was with us and he said John Rahm. And he kind of phrased it by saying, who plays great when he's angry? John Rahm. Little chip on his shoulder. That's what it is. That's what he actually said.